Adetunji Omotola, global African thought leader, joins me live from South Africa to look at some of the key things concerning the elections in Nigeria and developments on the continent as it relates to the activities of Africans and Nigerians in the diaspora. Good to see you, Adetunji, and thanks for your time as always. Now, Nigeria is moving into the big election in the next 4 to 5 days. And we've had this conversation with some other Africans, Nigerians, so to speak, in the diaspora, asking what use of what effect are Nigerians in the diaspora to the elections back home here. Take us through your thoughts. You've engaged in some of the campaigns and promises by candidates so far. Adetunji.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your show, and good evening to your listeners and the viewers. First of all, I always like to start from this premise. Many of us know that Nigerians are scattered all around the world. And in countries like the United States, we now have a Nigerian that sits as President Biden's Deputy Treasury Secretary, a gentleman by the name of Wale Adeyemo. And also many of us would know that there's a minister in cabinet in the UK, the United Kingdom, a lady by the name of Kemi Badenoch, who actually ran for the top job in the Conservative Party, which is to be the leader of the Conservative Party, but she came fourth in that first election that produced Liz Truss as the Prime Minister. So when you look at the power and position of Nigerians abroad, I mean, the likes of Toby Amuson and Anthony Joshua and Chimamanda Adichie, the famous author, you then ask a very critical question. Why is it that when it comes to the development of Nigeria, in fact, even positions in government, for example, the cabinet, which is the top level of government in Nigeria, you would only find maybe one random diasporan. So this question continues to bedevil our minds because Nigeria will be 63 this year, and it will be 30 years after the annulment of the June 12 elections in 1993 that produced the first undisputed election of a Nigerian by Nigerians of every color and religion. So we're really asking serious questions. Why is it so difficult to find diasporans at the very top of government in Nigeria, whereas the reverse is the case when you look everywhere else, even at the Bretton Woods institutions and the top American banks, you will find a Nigerian at the very top.
You know, Adetunji, I like the way you qualified it. You used the word scattered around, and listening to your analysis, truly, Nigerians are scattered around. It was only on Monday we saw about 5 of those great Nigerians sworn in the state of Georgia. And now, you know, the conversation started with us this week, and I spoke with Ejike Okpa, who lives in Dallas, Texas, and a few others. The thing here is that the country, the home country, Nigeria, hasn't actually been able till this moment to think in the direction of where you're coming from, to the extent that there is no legislation, no law that allows these powerful, important personalities from Nigeria to be a part of the political process.
Yes, look, you have a point that there is no enabling law that talks to Nigerians abroad being able to vote. So it's really linked to your domicilium, as it were. But when you look at it, I mean, if you want to use the analogy of the World Cup, the recent game that we saw for about a month, the World Cup that was held in Qatar, you will find that barring injuries, teams will bring their best players, their best 23 to the World Cup. irrespective of whether the manager is happy with the player. Largely, you will get the t-shirts if you're in form. So I would imagine that the same will be the trajectory, because if you look at it from even an economic standpoint, so you had in the last 3 years, $65 billion has been remitted by Nigerians abroad to Nigeria, which is more significant than the contribution that petroleum makes to the Nigerian economy. And we have a Ministry of Petroleum. In fact, if you look at the education sector, we have a Minister of Education. Well, what is the contribution of education to Nigeria's economy? It's not as significant as diaspora remittances. But I suspect the reason why this is also the case is because Nigerians and diaspora are scattered. We're not under one umbrella organization. There are a myriad of organizations, and many of them are also fighting amongst each other, and they're jostling for position. And some even take the organization and mold it in the persona of the leader of that organization. So those are some of the challenges that makes it difficult for Nigerians abroad to speak and act with one voice.
And in your analysis, we've started following you, looking at some of the key things you've been doing, putting Africa first, which is one of the key things here on News Central. Explain to us how Nigerians in diaspora can also help forge, a better conversation aimed at developing Nigeria and even the continent at large.
Yes, it's a very natural thing to do. Look, I can tell you without you even offering me any inducement that there are many Nigerians who are married to non-Nigerians of African extraction. I have a neighbor that is married to a Zimbabwean. I know that Kofi Annan was married to a Nigerian, and Kwame Nkrumah was married to an Egyptian, and Robert Mugabe was married to a Ghanaian, and Nelson Mandela, his wife before he died, Graça Machel, was from Mozambique. Now, if these great stalwarts were married to foreign women who are of African extraction, you can imagine how many Nigerians have already done so. Now, what also is important is the barriers to entry in some countries are far lower for Nigerians in diaspora to cross. So while you're waiting to say, oh, I've got enough money to take a container of maybe biscuits into Lagos, you'll find that you can do so very easily if you were to go into a smaller country, whether it's Botswana or Gambia or Lesotho. And what we talk about these days, there's a standard conversation around regional integration, Africa free trade. So people don't necessarily have to say, because I'm a Nigerian and I'm based in Moscow, that I have to go and do business in Nigeria. I know that Nigerians are very patriotic and they love going to do business in Nigeria, but they can also go and do business in Malawi. There's a lot of countries in Africa that with $10,000, you can start doing business straight away. You can register a company. I know Rwanda is one of the most easy countries in Africa to do business with. And they also have a national airline that is able to take you to most parts of Africa. So it's good for Nigerians in diaspora to begin to see themselves in much the same way as the Chinese do. And the Chinese go everywhere in Africa. They don't limit themselves to one or two countries.
But again, it's not happening the way you've painted it. Is it safe to say there seems to be a disconnect?
Yes, look, I think, again, look, the shortest flight into Africa from Europe will be at least 5-6 hours at the minimum. So, and the cost of flying into Africa, the cost of decent accommodation, the cost of transportation, all of these costs can be punitive if you wanted to, even for the most diehard patriotic Nigerian. Well, having said all of that, if I have to use myself as an example, which I rarely do, my first foray into doing business in Africa from Europe in the late 1990s was Togo. And why was that so? I used the example before. I had a friend who was married to a Togolese lady, and you tend to go to a place where you have affinity. So Nigerians should begin to look at the map of Africa. Every single country in Africa has huge potential. And we don't want to leave all the fun to the Chinese. So we need to begin to spread out across Africa. And that will also give us competitive advantage because we have numbers. So every country you go to, a significant country in Africa, you'd also find a Nigerian community, and most of them will also have a Nigerian embassy. And that helps you to be able to begin to build your integration very speedily.
And you know, we've seen some of the candidates go abroad. I mean, leave the continent, going to Europe and America to speak with sometimes Nigerians living in those countries, and some other times nationals of those countries. How much of such are they doing with the body of Nigerians around the continent?
Look, I think that what tends to happen, and I think is the historical basis of the relationship between Nigeria and the advanced nations. And also, you'll agree with me that there are more Nigerians in the UK, I suspect, in the US, than there are in Ghana or in Angola or South Africa. But also, what tends to happen, like in the final analysis, when Nigerian government, an elected government, is looking for assistance, they will tend to look westwards. They will be looking at France, your Bretton Woods institutions. So they generally tend not to look to Africa for investors, apart from perhaps South Africa. But I think also, as I said to you prior, the success of diasporans have an influence on our leadership back home will also depend on how smoothly and how well integrated the diaspora community is in the countries where they receive visits from either the president or a minister or a member of the Nigerian parliament. And I think that is a very key message I want to share with viewers, that Nigerians in diaspora tend to be as divided as you can ever imagine. And that also makes it very difficult to speed up the process of inclusion in the larger home nation of Nigeria.
We need to speak more on that and stretch it, because, you know, sometimes sitting here in Lagos, Nigeria, and you in South Africa, and some others watching across the other 54 African countries, one would have thought that there's this, you know, if you look at the OAU, now the AU, the phrase then used to be brother country and the brotherhood. What's happened to that?
Well, look, I mean, I have to say to you that the current state of affairs in South Africa, in the Nigerian community, there's been, I think, the level of despondency. Of course, there are other external factors like COVID and the electricity crisis, but the reality is that we have the most fragile Nigerian community that we've ever had. And I've been here for slightly over 2 decades. There's never been a time that we have had a poor vision of ourselves. And if you couple that with the negative perception that our hosts already have of us, it begins to tell you the nightmare existence that some of our people, particularly those who are living on the fringes, who don't really have much economic refuge, it is quite a tough time to be a Nigerian in South Africa. We're very divided, and beyond prayers, I don't know what we have to do. I've written an article about this issue about 8 years ago, but I don't think a lot of people shared it with with themselves or ourselves. But I'm happy to share that article widely, and I wrote it 8 years ago, so you can get a sense of how now more divided we are as a people. But again, it calls for bold leadership on the part of those who say that they want to serve, particularly those who want to go to Nigeria and provide leadership. We say to them, start leading us where you're at. So if you're a Nigerian in Ghana, start leading where you're at. And that's what Barack Obama told us when he was leaving office after 8 years. If you want, you can lead as a community teacher in your child's school. You don't have to be an elected official. You can do it in your homeowners association. You don't have to be a governor to lead. You don't have to be a president to lead. Nobody was born as a president.
You know, Adetunji, you've touched on a very sore point, but again, it's the reality. And now let's start talking about how we can actually fix what's broken. In this case, looking at the spirited, nature of Africans amongst themselves, and how much they can do by latching onto some knowledge and skills of those who are living outside the continent to help develop the continent.
Yes, Sulaiman, I came up with a concept. I mean, first of all, I said Nigerians and Diaspora will lead Africa, not just Nigeria. If you look at the history of our forebears, the first Nigerian lawyer, Sapara Williams, 1897. That's 126 years ago. I mean, the likes of Chief Rotimi Aledeh, Frederick Williams, popularly known as FRA, was called to the UK bar, the English bar, in 1994. The likes of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, and many eminent lawyers from Nigeria and other countries. I mean, it will interest you to know that the first Chief Justice of Botswana was Chief Justice Akinola Aguda. He was the first Chief Judge of Botswana. That was in 1966. So when you look at the fact that there's so many Nigerians abroad, and many of them are well educated, I mean, the US, the highest numbers of non-American ethnic groupings who are most educated, they are Nigerians. And I just shared with you earlier that there's a Nigerian in Biden's cabinet. God forbid, if anything were to happen to the Treasury Secretary, the shoe-in for that position, at least in terms of leverage, would be a Nigerian of Yoruba extraction. That must make every Nigerian proud, wherever they are. But I think the key thing that Nigerians also need to do, which we have established with clarity, wherever you are, first of all, yes, you love Nigeria. Everybody's passionate about what's going on in Nigeria, but you got to build and integrate into the new country, the host country, be law-abiding, get your driver's license, don't drink and drive. Basic things, basic common decency, try and learn the language. I mean, if you're in Germany, there's no way you can become a citizen of Germany without speaking German. It will never happen. So why would a Nigerian be in another country and not want to learn their language? I think that will give us more advantage. I've seen the Chinese do it. We have a Chinese member of parliament in South Africa, only one Chinese, but she's there, by the way. So I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from even our forebears who were diasporas, the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, who left the United States and went and became the secretary of the United Gold Coast Convention. And by 1951, he had formed his own party, the Convention People's Party. So what diasporans need to do is to support those who want to go back to Nigeria and contest in any position, in any party. We're in a democracy. Every person cannot be in the APC or the PDP or the Labour Party. There's so many parties in Nigeria. In the UK, you have likes of the Green Party, and they do have members of parliament. And I think the more the Nigerians discuss issues rather than personalities, the more we start getting closer to the kind of leaders that we want. Because personalities alone would not transform a nation. It's based on sacrifice and vision, and also working very hard. And I always remember the quotes by Lee Kuan Yew when he told President Obasanjo, former President Obasanjo, who shared that with us in 2017, that Singapore continues to do the simple things and they continue to do them very, very well. So Nigerians and diaspora should learn from Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore. To build a nation takes a lot more than an individual. It requires all of us to get involved and hold each other's hand and sing from the same hymn book.
Well, it's a fine place for us to leave it. But before I go quickly here, what's this thing about the wine circle? If you can quickly let me in on that.
Okay, so, you know, I live in a country that has more than 100,000 hectares under vine. In fact, this is the wine paradise of Africa, and the country that has the most wines under vine. So many years ago, a friend of mine, sadly, she's late now, she passed away. She was involved in an accident in Camps Bay in Cape Town, one of the most expensive suburbs of Cape Town. So those days we used to go around tasting wines on a regular basis. And so, you know, when you're going around, and it's almost like in a circle, and we're in Africa, and it's wine we're tasting. So that's how the name African Wine Circle came in. So it's actually a wine consultancy. And what we pride ourselves on doing is that we promote our own way of life as Africans. We are particularly passionate about African food, whether it's egusi, suya, dodo.
All right, I look forward to you coming back to Lagos someday so that we can go testing wine around Lagos. I'd like to thank you for your time. Yes, we go around the circle.
Yeah,
that should be after the election. Yeah, anyway, Adetunji Omotola, many thanks for speaking with us. We do hope to catch you again here on the HQ.